Hi guys, so today is day 21 of Lent, and I wanted to continue on with what I talked about yesterday. Yesterday we read from this book called The Jesus I Never Knew, and we discussed the temptation of Jesus and the way that this author kind of explains it for us to understand in a new light. And I thought it was really timely, especially in this Lent season where we're learning to give up something for God to get closer to him, whether that be something that's replacing him or something that's actually, like sinful. It's just us learning to like master our wills and self-control, which is really hard. It honestly really is. And so if you're struggling, it's not like an uncommon thing. And like I said last video, if you guys want to comment below your experience with Lent, then that would be awesome. But we were reading from this book, and he was talking about not, taking power for ourselves or being, basically selfish. Like Jesus says in his kingdom, the way to be great in his kingdom, the way to be number one, if you want to say, or to rule, is to give up your own self, like your own life, your own wants and needs. And again, that's really hard. And so, yeah, it's a challenge. And I kind of want to continue on because I know that idea is a little bit contrary to maybe to what we hear. And so I want to dive into that a little bit because this book goes on to tell the story of, it's like an excerpt from this story. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I think it's the brothers Karamazov. And he basically references this story. And the time he's writing the story, they're in the time of the Inquisition, which is when, the Catholic Church thought that the best way to handle people believing the wrong things about God was, to burn them and to basically just kill them, to exterminate them in order that people, the faith would be preserved. And that was obviously not a good time in history. And so it's kind of like a critique of that. So there's a lot to learn from it. But basically what happens is Jesus arrives in this fictional story, and he's just like a humble man who, and by humble I mean like lowly, like, not rich, or he was basically poor. And he's walking through the city and teaching and healing people, and people are like recognizing that it's him. He's kind of causing commotion, but he's not, fighting against the Spanish Inquisition. He's not like bringing an army to take over, because again, he's trying to break the cycle of violence. There's this character who's kind of like the leader of the Inquisition. His name is the Grand Inquisitor, and he basically puts Jesus in jail. And this is what he says. This is the author's kind of summary of that story. The Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor, has an accusation to make. By turning down the three temptations, Jesus forfeited the three greatest powers at his disposal. Again, he turned down those three things: miracle, mystery, and authority. He should have followed Satan's advice and performed the miracles on demand in order to increase his fame among the people. By resisting Satan's temptations to override human freedom, the Inquisitor says, Jesus made himself far too easy to reject. He surrendered his greatest advantage, the power to compel people to believe or make them believe. Fortunately, continues the sly Inquisitor, the church recognized the error of Jesus. And he's using strong language here, but it's making the point. The Grand Inquisitor, the leader of, that's leading the Inquisition in the church, he's a church leader, recognized the error of Jesus and corrected it. For this reason, the Inquisitor must execute Jesus one more time, lest he hinder the church's work. He had that line last time where he said a lot of the things that Jesus resisted in his, temptation is the things that we hope for, And again, like I had said, safety, wealth, and all of that is not wrong to want in certain measures. But, when we make it the end goal of, and make it all about ourselves, that's when it becomes an issue, because that can lead to extreme cases like this, the Inquisition, where people were thinking that the only way to make people stay in the faith was to, show force and kill everybody that disagreed, which is obviously not correct. Or it could be something like we see now where, like all of the evangelicals especially rallying behind someone like Trump, where they are so frustrated with the way that they think the world is, that they think the only way is for someone like him to take power and force, what they call God's principles and God's law and God's way onto people. And it's that frustration and that want for safety, because a lot of these people really, they think that they're doing what's going to bring safety to America, to them, to their families. And that, getting lost in that ideal is what brings them to make radical decisions like support a person like that, or to even just have that idea in their head. So and then, it could be something extreme like that where it's has to do with, a whole country, or even just in our own lives with the way we treat family, maybe that don't see things the way we see them. Obviously, it's really hard when it's hurting the family or it's hurting you. But again, Jesus' way is very different. And I just want to read this last part. The author of this book, he visits a place where communism used to be very rampant in Russia, especially in this in this newspaper where that they would publish things like propaganda, communist propaganda. And this is what he says. The editors of the newspaper remarked or said that Christianity and communism have many of the same ideals. And this is true: equality, sharing, justice, and racial harmony. Yet they had to admit the Marxist pursuit of that vision had produced the worst nightmare the world had ever seen. Why? So this is another example as well. We have communism, where when you really break it down, like the ideals of communism and Marxism are actually, you know, almost, I almost want to say identical to the Christian ideals, or they're getting at the same Christian ideals. So why doesn't it work? At least in the ways that we've seen it in history. We don't know how to motivate people to show compassion, said the editor-in-chief. We tried raising money for the children of Chernobyl, but the average Russian citizen would rather spend his money on drink. How do you reform and motivate people? How do you get them to be good? 74 years of communism had proved beyond all doubt that goodness could not be legislated from the Kremlin, or, the leader of the communists, and enforced at the point of a gun. In a heavy irony, attempts to compel morality or to force someone to be good tend to produce defiant subjects or rebellious people and tyrannical rulers who are trying to enforce that moral behavior, who lose their moral core. I came away from Russia with a strong sense that we Christians would do well to relearn the basic lesson of the temptation. Goodness cannot be imposed externally from the top down. It must grow internally from the bottom up. The temptation in the desert reveals a profound difference between God's power and Satan's power. Satan has the power to coerce, like to convince, to dazzle, to force obedience, to destroy. Humans have learned much from that kind of power, and governments draw deeply from it. With a bullwhip, a club, like a bat, an AK-47, human beings can force other human beings to do just about anything they want with that kind of force. Satan's power is external and coercive, but God's power, in contrast, is internal and non-coercive. You would not enslave a man by a miracle, and craved faith given freely, not based on a miracle, said the Grand Inquisitor to Jesus in this story. Such power may seem at times like weakness, and that's the truth. A lot of us see that and think, that's like the way for me to end up hurt. That's the way for me to end up seeming like weak to other people. But God is not a Nazi, said Thomas Merton. Indeed, God is not. The master of the universe would become its victim, powerless before a squad of soldiers in a garden. God made himself weak for one purpose: to let human beings choose freely for themselves what to do with him. I love what he kind of ends it by contrasting Satan's power and God's power. I think it's strong language, but it also is kind of compelling to hear that whenever we give in to forcing things upon people, to forcing our morality, that we're actually giving in to say not only are we not following God's ways, but we're actually giving in to the evil in the world. And so that's the difference, is that, like he was giving this example of Marxism, which again, there's a lot of discussions to be had about that, about, Marxism and how it fits with Christianity. But, what is kind of clear is that it seems to be going for the same ideals of, of equality, justice, for the poor, letting the rich be accountable. Like all of that aligns perfectly with Christian ideals. The difference is the way it was being enforced. When you have like a dictator that's, has an army, and they're the ones that are enforcing morality, that never ends up good. It always brings about rebellion, and people, like it says, you can point a gun at someone and or force them to, give their money to the poor, let's say. But really, internally, they'd rather just spend it on beer, like it says there. That's the context in Russia, but I'm sure it's similar here. So just using fear or anger to try to change someone, as much as that's like our first reaction. I mean, it's my first reaction when I fear for a family member and I want to protect them. It's to, freak out and maybe even be mad, just like to try to keep them safe. But that's not bringing internal change, which is really the point, is that Jesus is patient. He wants to transform us from the inside, because he knows if we're not transformed from our heart, then, all the good stuff we do externally really has no value, because it's coming out of a place of being forced, or out of like obligation, which is, something that I think we all struggle with. So it's a reminder for us, especially in this Lent season, like I've said, to really give ourselves to God in a way that allows him to transform the way we think. Again, it's like I said at the beginning, this is a tradition that has been for 2,000 years, the Ash Wednesday and Lent and all of that. And so for a lot of people, it's become a tradition where it's like, okay, I'm just going to give up something. They don't even really think about it anymore. It's just like, okay, I'm going to give up this, social media or a phone, and or just whatever, they choose. And that's just what it is to them, a tradition. And then at the end of the 40 days, they just go back to regular life. But the point is that we would be transformed through these kinds of traditions. So again, these 40 days are not make or break for your faith or for your journey with God, but it is a reminder and a kind of like a wake-up call in the middle of your year, or at the beginning of your year, to align yourself back with God and let him transform you. So if that's not the goal of our Lent, then it's almost better if we don't do it. But I hope that you guys will. And even if you guys have not even started, it doesn't even have to be during the Lent season. My prayer for you guys is just that you will let God transform you. And so, yeah, if you want to learn more, just keep following along. Put your questions down in the comments. I'm learning just as much as you guys. So it's just that I love, reading and learning. So maybe I can help you with certain questions. But again, like I'm not trying to say I know everything, but I would love to help in any way that I can. And so please subscribe, please comment. And yeah, I'll probably be posting another video tomorrow, just a quick reflection. And thank you guys. Bye.